Things over to Feriel, who can give us some updates from her perspective on what's going on.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thanks, Tiffany, for inviting me here to speak to everybody today. You're giving me too much credit. I don't know what's going to come next, but I can talk to you about the facts that we know of as industry. So we have, thankfully, been engaging with the G7 Technical Committee on this issue since the first statement was made by the G7. When the war started, the US actually was the first to sanction Alrosa. As Sarah mentioned, sanctioned their previous CEO and has now also sanctioned current CEO and also sanctioned GRIB. So 100% of Russian diamonds are now sanctioned by the US government. This was followed by the UK government. There were sanctions there. There wasn't a level playing field on the sanctions landscape because the EU did not sanction Alrosa and did not sanction their CEOs. There was an external sanction, meaning no luxury goods were going to go from the EU into Russia, but not the other way around. So from an industry perspective, there was no level playing field, or there was a bit of confusion. And before the sanctions, to add to the confusion, there was an executive order, which wasn't a sanction, right? It was an executive order from Biden to say no more Russian diamond, no more diamonds from Russian origin entering the US. But the definition of origin under that executive order, and any executive order on any product, is where the product has been substantially transformed. And so when it comes to diamonds, it's where it's been cut and polished. And as we know, now I'm going to get this fact wrong, but it's between 10 out of 11 or 9 out of 11 diamonds are cut and polished in India, which meant that essentially under this definition, 99% of diamonds will be origin India, right? So we were all trying to figure this out as it was happening real time. And when the G7 came out and made a statement that unified their objectives, it was great because it created a level playing field for industry. And we could start understanding the direction that they were going. Because most of us, even if we are smaller independents, we don't operate in a vacuum. Our suppliers are from other countries, and this industry is global, and our product is the most sustainable product in the world. It is 1 billion years old, and it will exist in 1 billion years' time. And so it's a product that's going to be moving in and out of the G7, recycled, grandfathered, and everything else that we've discussed in the past when it comes to old stock. So what was important for us was to get clarity as industry as to what is happening and how do we get ready. Now that G7 statement of the 6th of December became extremely important because it gave us some clarity on what was coming our way. And what we understood was, okay, on the 1st of January, there was going to be a blanket ban on all Russian diamonds coming directly from Russia, full stop. So that's simple to understand. That was clear. On the 1st of March, there was going to be an indirect ban. And that would be for 1 carat. What confused us was rough and polished, I have to admit. That's still confusing. And then on the 1st of September, we're going to bring that down to 0.5 carat. So that was what we'd understood to be the unified position of the G7. We engaged as industry to say, we're here to help. We totally support your objectives. And as industry experts, we want to make sure that we can help make this process effective. Now, sanctions are very different to import restrictions. Sanctions are targeted towards a company, an individual, etc. So if I'm going to sanction Tiffany, Feriel should have no problem at all because I should be moving freely because I'm not Tiffany. An import restriction is all-encompassing. It applies to Tiffany, it applies to Feriel, and that's why it mattered for us, because it would apply to non-Russian diamonds. And we would all need to be able to comply with the import restrictions for the legitimate trade to be able to flow freely inside and outside of the G7, given our product is global and continues to move in and out of the G7. And so what we pushed for is what I can share. So first of all, on the 1st of March, when the regulation came, as Sarah explained, there was different regulations coming out for different nations and the EU. The EU spoke about this rough node in Belgium that required all diamonds that would enter the EU, that were destined to the EU, to have to pass through this rough node in Belgium so that Belgium could verify it and issue a G7 certificate. There was also a pilot being announced on a digital traceability platform, this public ledger, that would potentially come into play on the 1st of September. The common ground across all G7 nations was the evidence that an industry member would need to maintain. Some would need to provide it, and others, you don't need to provide it unless you're asked. But the EU stood alone in this idea of a rough node for the EU. With the US, they requested attestations. And if you don't mind going back to the slide with the attestations, there was 2 attestations provided. And even as an industry expert, we engaged with many other industry members to say, hey, let's understand what these 2 attestations mean. From memory, yes, thank you. So from memory, and now that we've got the words, I certify that the non-industrial diamonds in the shipment were not mined, extracted, produced, or manufactured wholly or in part in the Russian Federation. And it includes substantially transformation. So that means any diamond that was mined in Russia, cut and polished anywhere else, right, isn't allowed in. And when I sign this attestation, it means that the parcel that I'm importing does not contain any Russian diamonds loose. The second one is talking about diamond jewelry. And it says, okay, this parcel has nothing that comes directly from the Russian Federation. So what's missing in these 2? The first one is missing grandfathered. So my advice to every American company is you can't sign this if those diamonds were Russian but purchased before the war. So what we've asked for as industry is to ask the US government to provide another attestation, another solution for old stock, because there is a lot of Russian old stock that was purchased legitimately by US businesses before the war. And we have, maybe I'm biased because I am from the UK, we like the UK regulation. I think it's the most comprehensive one out of the G7 that was issued from the 1st of March. So yay the UK.
Cheerio.
And they have included a requirement to recognize Russian diamonds that were purchased, that were outside of Russia before the 1st of March. So what we've asked the US government to do for the US traders to please include that as well. We've got the size range here, and we've also got something here for jewelry, but we don't know if the US government is going to include direct or indirect ban on jewelry. And all we're asking for is please let us know, because industry needs to get prepared. We need time to get things right, especially when it comes to jewelry. So that's for the US. Now the UK, as I said, totally biased but really factual, it is the best regulation out there. And we believe that Canada is also got an attestation, but the Canadian one is a form that you need to submit with each shipment, again, signing an attestation. And with Japan, it's very similar. Now, all of them may not need you to provide the evidence at the time of shipment, but they all require you to maintain the evidence just in case you're asked. But some are requiring the evidence, like the EU, like the UK. So the second thing that we've asked for, so the first, just a quick reminder, was grandfathered. The second thing that we've asked for is that it's okay to have different requirements, different laws. It's fine. Because what makes sense for the UK makes sense for the UK, what makes sense for the US makes sense for the US, etc. But we do certainly hope that the G7 will cross-recognize each other's different guidelines. So once we've complied with one, that would be recognized by the others and our goods can come in and out. The point is to facilitate the legitimate trade into the G7 so that we can all support each other. The third thing that we've been pushing for is where should certification happen? Now, can I just ask people in the room, I asked this morning and I was pleasantly surprised about how many people knew about the KP. So maybe it's the same, maybe it's not. Can I ask you to raise your hand if you know about the Kimberley process and what it actually is? Really pleasantly surprised again. So, the Kimberley process is a facilitator of trade, for the trade. Okay, it's the floor. It provides a government independent certificate on that parcel of rough diamonds. Any decision that's made at the Kimberley process needs to be enshrined into law in 85 countries. That is why those conversations are a little bit difficult. It is not a talk shop about what good looks like. It is a decision-making meeting. And those decisions happen usually once a year in November. But now we've changed the requirements and we're actually making them twice a year. We had the last decisions made 2 weeks ago in Dubai. And I'll tell you about what's happened there in a second. But the G7 had a legitimate concern. They said, and it was in one of these slides, we don't accept KP certificates of mixed origin. How do I not know? How do I know that there's no Russian diamonds in those? It just says mixed origin. And frankly, that is a legitimate concern. And so through the World Diamond Council, we worked very hard to change the rules to get the KP to support a best practice where countries that participate in the Kimberley process can start issuing KP certificates with the list of countries of origin for all mixed parcels. Of course, some can choose to maintain the mixed origin, but the majority have agreed with us, 84 out of 85 countries, that they will support providing the list of countries of origin. And that is a big, big advancement. And so from now on, we're going to have KP certificates that are transparent, that will tell you where the goods come from. And others that will say mixed, and those can go elsewhere. So we've said to the G7, please request this transparent KP certificate so that you can actually understand where the goods come from. And it will be signed by a sovereign country and legitimized. And we as industry will support the traceability of that diamond from the baseline, which is the Kimberley process certificate. So that was number 3, and we hope that we'll be heard on that front as well. Now, as industry, we have been working on provenance and traceability for 2 decades. We started with segregation. We then moved on in 2015 with digitalization, and we're now supporting the Kimberley process with digitalization as well. But there are so many traceability solutions that have come not just from the war, but before, because we all understand the future is about telling the natural diamond story to the future consumer. We need to talk to them about provenance, sustainability, just in case they ask. We need to know where our goods come from. And so since 2017, we've been, as De Beers, developing Tracer, which is the leading blockchain solution that supports traceability from source through to retail. And it's accessible to anyone in the industry. And we're not the only ones. We have GIA in the room. GIA also launched M2M. They did that before. And they've got many other solutions there for the trade that are accessible to the US industry. We have iTraceIt that are pushing on the smaller stones that don't even fall within the gated criteria of the G7. And that's because industry has been pushing for provenance and traceability just in case we need it, because we need to tell a better diamond story. But we can use those mechanisms to support the needs of governments as well. And that's why we as De Beers have accelerated our efforts on them. But the most important thing is to ensure that we're heard. And so I call on everyone in the room, if you are aligned with what we're asking for, which is clarity on rough to polished, right? We can't have, I think I said this in Dubai, one day I hope half a carat rough will turn into half a carat polished. We're not there yet. One day I hope that 1 carat rough will turn into 1 carat polished. We're not there yet. Maybe technology will help us. But what we know is the G7 countries are consumer countries. And so what we want is these restrictions to be applied to half a carat and up from the 1st of September on gem quality polished and whatever the rough equivalent is. Now that's clear to the trade and we know how to comply with that. And frankly, that's where the value is. So if you want to target value, that's where you need to be. That's one. I hope you're aligned with us on that front. 2, grandfathered. Please find us a solution that is simple for grandfathered goods so that recycled diamonds and US businesses can sign an attestation that is true. Because we don't want good guys to make a mistake and look back just because there isn't an option here to say these are grandfathered diamonds, right? So that's 2. 3, let's push for a transparent KP certificate. Ask for a KP certificate that has the list of countries of origin. Support the digitalization of the KP certificate and get informed on the digital traceability solutions because we as industry need to maintain that traceability when it comes to the polished. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Feriel. We have some time for questions.